We're going to be doing something in the next few weeks and months. And when I say we, I mean we. I'm also meaning Alex and I will be team teaching. I'll take the month of May and he'll have June and I'll have July, and we'll be doing it like that. We're calling this room. What we're doing is we're wanting to begin thinking about what the new normal should be when COVID is finally behind us. And we're not having to wear masks, and we're not having to social distance, and all that's come with coronavirus and the restrictions and the limitations. Over and over and over again, we've heard people talk about, I can't wait for things to get back to normal. And as we've thought about that desire, which is an understandable desire, I've got it. I can't wait for us to get back to normal when we're not having to use these little packaged Lord's Supper servings that I can't open up. Like this morning, I couldn't get the bread out. And I thought, I can't wait for us to get back to normal when we're actually just serving some bread to you and serving some of the cup to you, and it's already open. I mean, it's just there. Either that or to remind myself not to trim my fingernails the night before. Anyway, I don't know if anybody else had trouble getting into yours, but I couldn't get to mine. But normal, I want us to think for just a moment about getting back to normal. Because prior to COVID, in fact, I'm going to say for 2, 3, maybe 4 years before COVID settled in on us, I was hearing, Alex was hearing, others were hearing us say words like, I am so busy. Or words like, I'm hurried all the time, or just I'm always constantly rushed, or I'm just played out. I'm tired all the time. There's pressure on me all the time. Occasionally, we would hear someone use the word burnout. And I take that word very seriously because I've been burned out and I know what that's like. And as I've thought about getting back to normal, I thought, well, by goodness, let's not get back to that. So what does a new normal look like? And so our hope as we move into this study that we're calling Room, and we've chosen that name simply because the other names that we were thinking about using, an author has already written a book using that word that we were going to use, or somebody else is using it for something. So we thought, well, we don't want to overuse somebody else's word, so Room is what we landed on. How do we create a normal for a congregation where we can honestly describe our lives as having room? Room in our schedule, yes, but this is not a time management study. What we're talking about is room in our soul, where we can say there's space in our soul that lets us love God and love people. So I've got a couple of questions for you. One is this: is busy what Jesus imagines as normal? And if not, and I hope not, what is normal for Jesus. And how do we tap into that? So first, I just want us to think and to kind of be candid and honest about, well, what are some of those things that are feeding into this busyness? One of them is that most of you are in a season of life right now. And life has seasons in it. And I've been through most of them. And some of them are busier than others. And many of you right now are in one of those busy seasons that is characterized by young families with extra pressure that comes from the needs of children. And it just comes with it. And so that's normal, and that's not necessarily something's wrong with that. Some of you are in a collegiate period of time where it just brings with it some extra pressure, some extra demands that you didn't have before. Some of you have some extra, or they're external or internal pressures that are in addition to this season. And what I mean by that is you're facing some health problems right now, or some financial challenges. There's some pressure, possibly through a boss, possibly just through what the company, the firm is dealing with, but it's a job-related thing. Some of you may have aging parents, and there's the extra needs that they have, and then the pressure, the drain that puts on you. Some of you face personality issues. It may be an occasional bout with depression, but these sorts of things add to these seasons. And so you find yourself especially busy or under this sense of pressure. There's no room in your life. Third, there is the constant speed of life around us. And not only is there this constant speed, but there's this sense of obligation that it brings with it that seems to say we've got to keep up with it. Everybody has to be operating at this increasingly fast pace in life. So I want to take just a minute and talk about speed. Have you ever thought about the history of speed? Well, I'm going to draw something from a book written by John Mark Comer. Some of you have seen it's a popular book, readily available. If you buy it and you're in a lot of hurry and can't read all of it, chapter 3 and chapter 4 are worth the price of the book. But in that, he gives his own history of speed. And so I'm just going to glean some from what he gives and share it with you just to illustrate the point we're making here. In around 5,500 BC, someone had a breakthrough in technology called the sundial. And it took the day and chopped it up into pieces. In around the year 200, poets were complaining about what the sundial had done to their lives. So, for example, Palladius writes, "It cut and hacked their day into small portions." People were already complaining about what the sundial had done. In 600 AD, monks began dividing up the day into either 6 or 7 portions, and so they would these pauses would be times to bring all the monks in, and they would spend that time in prayer. probably not a bad thing. It's just it was, again, dividing up the day and speeding up life. In around 1370, the first clock tower in Cologne, Germany, was built. And now an entire city is being run by the clock. And before then, time had a very natural rhythm to it. You got up when the sun got up, or when the birds got up, and you went to bed when it was dark. Your days were longer during the summer and shorter during the winter. Speed, to me, has been sort of an interesting thing. I've been enjoying reading biographies of George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and those men. It's mentioned in their biographies about the speed of life. And in their time, the fastest thing known to man, at least in terms of communication and travel, was the back of a horse. That's as fast as you could go. In 1879, Edison gave us the invention of the light bulb, and no longer does the sun and the moon schedule our day. Before Edison, the average person got 11 hours of sleep a night. Now, I suppose when I was in college, that's how much time my roommate slept, but I can't imagine 11 hours of sleep. But that was how much the average person got. About a century ago, life-saving or labor-saving devices began to spring up. Instead of having to go chop down a tree so you could put it in the fireplace and heat up your house, now we just go to the thermostat and bump it up a couple of notches, or we tell our telephone, here's how we want our thermostat to be set, and we set it that way. Or we used to have to walk to school or walk to church. Now we hurry to get there in a car so we can get there just in time. We used to write our letters by hand in these long flowing sentences filled with rich vocabulary. Now we hurry up to send a quick text or a tweet. And so where did all the time go that we've saved? Well, we just do more things, or we work more. Leisure time has gone down, and the average American actually works nearly 4 more weeks every year than they did in 1979. And during that same period, we have seen the death of the Sabbath. This day where a society took a break, and not only took a break from work, but actually had time so it could realign itself and reorganize itself around God and His priorities. Do any of you, and I won't ask for a show of hands, but do any of you remember the day when nothing but the church was open on Sunday? Now, though, everything except possibly Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby is open. My mailman is out in the neighborhood on Sunday, and Amazon is delivering packages on Sunday. There's no stopping anymore. And we've lost more than a day of rest. We have lost a day every week for our souls to open up to God and to gain reorientation. In 1440 AD, it was one of the continental divides in culture when Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. In 2007, there was another continental divide when Steve Jobs released the iPhone into the wild. And now, the average person touches his phone 2,617 times for a total of 2.5 hours for 76 sessions a day. And your phone doesn't work for you, you work for it. You know, a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. Since the year 2000, our attention span has dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. And as I was putting this together, I thought that's what I'm dealing with when I'm thinking about how do I present something on a Sunday morning that they're going to remember, because the odds are after 8 seconds, their mind goes somewhere else. That's just the way it is today. John Mark Comer and I are not saying that we need to throw away our phones and put them in the trash, go buy a farm, and walk everywhere or ride a horse every place. There are times when speed is actually a good thing. When your 3-year-old darts after his ball into the street, you had better be fast. Or when your wife goes into labor, you'd better get busy. Or when you see flames lapping up on the roof of your neighbor's house and you're the first person to see it, you had better be fast. So we're not against speed. Speed has its place, but we are asking the question, is hurry and speed meant to be normal? Or has something gone wrong when we lose our sense of room in life, and especially room in our soul? And do we have the courage to chase after room rather than living faster and faster and faster? What does Jesus say about room and a roomy soul? Well, I want to give you what I believe is the starting place in answering that question. In Matthew chapter 22, beginning in verse 36, and you can find this also in Luke chapter 10 or in Mark chapter 12, but a lawyer, and a lawyer in the New Testament was not somebody who argued in court. A lawyer was somebody who argued Old Testament law and debated it. And he came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" Now, this man wasn't coming because he was curious and he was interested in how do I really figure this out for my life? he was coming so he could find something wrong with what Jesus said, and then he could fuss about it. That's why he came with this question. But immediately, Jesus replied by taking Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, making a couple of adaptations and giving it to this man and giving it to us. I wonder, as I've worked on this, if this is what Jesus had been meditating on personally. But he answers and says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your mind." Deuteronomy includes the idea of might and strength, and Luke includes that phrase as he quotes Jesus, and I put it up there in italics. Jesus stresses a life where everything we do, everything that you are, involves God and loving him. That's what it's all about. In other words, there's plenty of room in your day, and there's plenty of room in your soul to love God and to love the people that he brings into your life, whether they're scheduled or not. I want you to notice with me, for what we're going to be able to do this morning, this word soul. We use the word, but we don't use it often. And frankly, I don't remember the last time I really taught on the word soul. The word heart gets a lot of attention. But I don't know that the word soul is unpacked very often. So let me try to do something preliminary, at least introductory, on what do we mean by soul and why is it so important. Now, Jesus has just quoted from Deuteronomy chapter 6. 2 chapters before that, in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9, God tells Moses to bring this to the people of Israel, and that is, only give heed to yourself and keep your soul diligently. So that raises a question for me, and I'm raising it for you. As you plan your week, is keep my soul diligently at the top of the list? Is it even on the list? Here's why. Because the person that has this well-kept soul is able to go through life and not forget the things which their eyes have seen, and they don't depart from your heart all the days of your life. But you're able more and more and more to take these lessons you've learned from God and about God, and you're able to pass them on to your children, and you're able to pass them on to other people. They're rich in your soul. There's room in you because you have a well-kept soul. Now, soul, the word itself, the idea itself is a bit difficult to just define, because there's one sense in which soul is a very deep thing. And as the biblical writers see it, as I understand it, even though heart is that internal part of you and that deep part of you, soul would probably be described as even deeper than heart. So there's a depth of it. It probably goes a little further than you're aware of right now, or that you can get to right now. There's another sense in which soul is what the rest of us see when we're relating with you. We're seeing soul. It's your person. And so we speak of someone as a soul. Or we ask the question, how many people were in church this morning? Well, there were about 75 or 80 souls. Your soul is that part of you that puts all the pieces of who you are together in an orderly way. And if your soul is cared for well, you're in control of how you relate to people and situations rather than those things controlling you. If your soul is not cared for well and it's in disarray, you find yourself strained to really live life like you really want to live life. You just don't have it within you to do. And you find that you're doing the best you can to look good on the outside, while on the inside the pieces just aren't fitting together well. Thus, it is critical that you understand how to care for your soul so that there's room in your day. There's room in your inner self so that you can operate well. You can love God and you can love people because there's room. And that's what we're going to be looking at and going into detail, step by step, in the coming weeks. I can't wait to hear what Alex brings to us when he unpacks this. I've seen some of what he's going to do, and you'll want to hear it as well. Jesus goes on to say that the individual with room in his soul has room to put the needs and the interests of other people above his own. And so he says in verse 39, the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. It's another way of saying that this emphasis he just said, if this is the first and foremost commandment, there's a first and foremost element or component to the way we treat people. The way a father treats his kids, the way a husband treats his wife. There's this first and foremost priority. And so there was room in his soul that week, no matter what was going on at work or what's going on in other areas of his life. There's room in his soul to love his wife, to love his kids, and then to love the other people that God brings into his life. First of all, there was room to love God. And how we relate to people really matters. It's not simply because we happen to have an outgoing personality type, and so it just sort of comes natural. It always has, because we were born that way. It's more than that. It's because there's space in us for people. And just like you find joy in loving God, you find joy in loving the people that he puts into your life. So I want to close by getting real practical here. And I'm going to give you an assignment, a little project. if when you came in you picked up or were handed the notes for this morning, it's on there. And here's what I'm going to urge you to do. I've done it myself. Begin by drawing a picture, some kind of a little sketch of how the last few days felt for you. Then take that picture and describe it to God. Just tell God, God, this is what was going on in me these last few days. Then sit down with somebody else, ideally somebody else that heard this morning so they know what you're talking about, and just discuss it with them. Be open and honest with somebody else about here's what's going on in my life. I want to show you my picture. I'm not saying your picture has to look like this. I'm just illustrating what I did. Actually, I came up with two pictures, and the first one looks like that. And what that is just sort of a day when my soul's not in good shape. Meaning, it's a one-dimensional day. What's on my mind is what I've got to get done, this stuff I need to do. And so there's all these responsibilities that I've got to pack into my day. And so I've got responsibilities, I've got duties, I've got interruptions I've got to deal with, there's chores I've got to do, there's these wastes of time that inevitably I do. Then there's some situation that comes along, it just feels awkward, but I've got to deal with it. But I've got to get all of this done. I'm looking at that and describing that as a one-dimensional day. It deals with chore. It deals with responsibility. It deals with just things I've got to do. I shared this picture with my community group the other night and just asked them what goes through their minds when they have days like this or extended periods of time like this. Here's some of their responses. There's not a graciousness when I'm asked to do something, or everything just feels like a chore. My sleep suffers. I'm touchy. I do things for the approval of others rather than for God. My best effort is only about 80%. Or I tend to be driven by perfectionism. Well, that makes sense when life is all about things I've got to get done and more things I've got to get done. I drew a second picture of what I'd like my life and my soul to look like. And at this one, I still got things I've got to get done. But I want there to be room. I want there to be a spirit and a motive where everything I do has a spirit of joyfully loving God involved in how I do it, in why I do it. And I want there to be room in my day to be flexible so that I can pause and love God and I can enjoy the people He brings into my life even if they weren't on my schedule. And I want to go to bed at night without my soul being all knotted up from pressure and hurry, but rather that there would be peace, room. So draw that picture. Draw a picture of how it's been. Maybe draw a second picture of how you'd like it to be. And it doesn't have to look like mine. You be creative and just express yourself. But think about it And then a second question. Ask God to teach you what to do to take care of your soul. Let me pray. Father, I'm going to ask, and I trust that we are asking, that you would make us people who have room in the deepest place of our being. And that from that place there comes a wellspring of life that loves you like Jesus describes. That it's with all of our heart, all of our soul, all of our mind, and all of our strength. And then, as you bring people in our lives, that we would enjoy loving them very, very, very well. Would you help us to understand how the Holy Spirit has been poured out in our lives, and he pours out the love of God into our hearts so that we can do this very well. Would you help us with that? And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Before I step down, I want to just offer that if there's anyone here this morning and you'd find yourself saying, I've been considering becoming a follower of Christ. I've been considering becoming a Christian. I'd like some more information, or I'd like to do that this morning. Catch me after the service. I'll be around. Or Brent will be here, and just find us. And we'll do what we can to answer your questions and help you take that next step of knowing Christ well. Brent?